We're going to pick up. We're going to pick up where we left off last week. And we're going to focus on the Ark of the Covenant. All right. We're going to take a closer look at that. And where I want to begin is I want to review a video that we played last week. It was by, do you have that video?
You texted it to me.
Not that one. The one that you played as a part of the lesson last week. We're going to review a video that we played last week about the construction of the Ark of the Covenant. And if you remember, those of you that were here last week, if you remember, it was a short video. I don't know, 5 minutes or so. There was a Christian woman who was doing the video, and she really tried to kind of sculpt the narrative to make it make sense. All right. So you remember we talked about that. So he's going to pull that one up. We're going to start with that, and then we're going to jump right in.
The Ark one, that. Right? You want the Ark one?
It was the white lady.
Well, yeah, I know it's the white lady.
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
Because this is the tabernacle one. Let me see. I can find it.
Oh, it's right here. That's right there.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
3 minutes. Right, it's a 3 minute.
Mm-hmm. All right, let me get that.
This is just to refresh your memory.
Okay, of course, it's playing the ad, and then we'll get it up here.
I don't think there's volume yet.
Okay. All right, here we go.
At Sinai, God gave instructions to Moses on how to build the tent tabernacle as a sacred space. Within the tabernacle, there was to be an even more sacred space, the Holy of Holies, that would contain a gold-covered box, the Ark of the Covenant. To understand what God was communicating to his people, it's necessary to look at their culture of the time, that of Egypt's new kingdom. When we do, we discover that Egypt had many parallels to the Ark. The Bible does not call the Ark of the Covenant by the same word as the Ark of Noah or the Ark basket of baby Moses. Instead, it uses a word that means coffer, chest, or coffin. In Egypt, a coffin wasn't just a place to inter a dead body. It acted like a substitute body for the spirit of the deceased, a place they could return to. There are Egyptian boxes that were ceremonially wrapped in a red cloth, just like the Ark was. And with the discovery of the undisturbed tomb of King Tutankhamun, a perfectly preserved Anubis chest was revealed. These chests carried the organs of the deceased in the funeral procession to the tomb. It was a wooden box covered with gold inside and out, like the Ark. It was carried by poles attached to its bottom, its lid was referred to as the mercy seat, and a statue of Anubis sat proudly on top. All features of the Ark of the Covenant, except for the idol. Rather than an idol, the Ark of the Covenant had two cherubim, angelic beings with outstretched wings that met together over the mercy seat. From between the cherubim, God's presence would meet with Israel. Protective winged creatures also created sacred space in Egypt. There are multiple examples of Egyptian winged goddesses, protectors of the divine with outstretched wings whose tips touch. So, what does all of this mean? Mainly, that God was using cultural imagery familiar to the Israelites to speak with them. Rather than being just another one of Egypt's gods, God was above all, sacred, as represented by the boxes, the tabernacle structure, and the winged cherubim, present to speak with Israel, as represented by the mercy seat, and greater than any image, there was no idol image of God. The Ark was also a type of reliquary, a place to put sacred things. Inside the Ark at first were the tablets of the law given to Moses on Sinai. These tablets were likely flakes of stone that measured around the same size of 1 or 2 man's hands. They needed to fit within the Ark. Placing them inside the Ark corresponds with the Near Eastern practice of placing a treaty at the feet of the chief god of the people. The Bible tells us that the Ark was also known as the footstool of God. These comparative studies show us that God chose to use imagery that already symbolized issues of the divine.
Yeah, this is where she's
Israelites.
just
but
trying to make
he
it fit.
rearranged it to reveal himself. He didn't expect them to use his language right away. Instead, he spoke to them in theirs.
Yeah, okay. All right, so yes, you can see how she's trying to kind of wedge that in to make it make sense. All right, but that video is just showing how the Ark of the Covenant was so very similar to Egyptian design that predated it. I want to go to Exodus 25. Can you actually bring it up online so they can kind of read along? We're going to Exodus 25.
Exodus 25.
I can actually find it. I didn't want to put this on a slide because it was too much, y'all. I hate how they always default to the NIV. All right, so Dwayne, can you bring that up so they can see it? Okay, great. Perfect. Okay, so Exodus 25. Shout out to Wade, who was already here last week and was in the chat. Exodus 25 is where, and we're just going to read in the KJV, where the Lord is speaking to Moses and giving him instruction about the ark. So Exodus 25, we're going to go down to starting at verse 10. And they shall make an ark of shittim wood. 2 cubits and a half shall be the length thereof, and 1 cubit and a half the breadth thereof, and 1 cubit and a half the height. And thou shalt overlay it with pure gold, within and without thou shalt overlay it. And thou shalt make upon it a crown of gold round about. And thou shalt cast 4 rings of gold for it, and put them in the 4 corners. And the 2 rings shall be in one side of it, and 2 rings on the other side of it. And then you shall make staves or rods of shittim wood. Yeah, and overlay them with gold. And thou shalt put the staves into the rings by the sides of the ark. That basically so that you can carry the ark, right? That the ark may be borne with them. And the staves shall be in the rings of the ark, and they shall not be taken from it, right? So you're not supposed to remove the rods from the ark. And thou shalt put into the ark the testimony which I shall give thee. And thou shalt make a mercy seat of pure gold. 2 cubits and a half shall be the length thereof, 1 cubit and a half the breadth thereof. And thou shalt make 2 cherubims of gold. Of beaten work thou shalt make them in the 2 ends of the mercy seat. I really want to say something here. Let me keep going. And make 1 cherub, and it goes on, all the construction, right? 1 cherub on one end, the other cherub on the other end, the mercy seat, the cherubims on the 2 ends of the mercy seat. The cherubims shall stretch forth their wings on high, covering the mercy seat with their wings. And their faces shall look one to another towards the mercy seat, shall the faces of the cherubims be. And thou shalt put the mercy seat above upon the ark, and in the ark you should put the testimony that I'll give you. And there I will meet with thee, and I will commune with thee from above the mercy seat, from between the 2 cherubim, which are upon the ark of the testimony, of all the things which I will give thee in commandment unto the children of Israel. Okay. And so here we're looking at instructions. All right. Per the Bible, these are instructions that the Most High gave to Moses on how to build this Ark of the Covenant. And so I want to, before we're going to go to another short clip of a video here in just a second, but why, I shouldn't start questioning just yet, but why is the design that the book says the Most High gave to Moses almost an exact replica of his father, grandfather, okay, Pharaoh, of his grandfather's house. And by grandfather, I mean Moses taken in by a daughter of Pharaoh, brought into Pharaoh's house, and lived in Pharaoh's house from the time he was 3 months, a baby, for 40 years. Lived in the house of Pharaoh. Lived in the house of Pharaoh. All right. When I say son, just like we say our forefathers, I'm using it in that kind of context. Okay. As a son of Pharaoh. Would he not have already known what these arcs looked like? Would he not have already come in contact with this type of construction? Because there was a mercy seat on the Egyptian box as well. It was the same construction. Would he have not already encountered it? So it's very it just leaves a lot of things to be explored. Okay. I'm gonna move to the second video, and we're gonna show that as well. It reiterates some of the things in the video we just saw, but it takes it adds a little bit more. Okay.
You sent me that link, right? It's this one.
This one.
And do I start it at the beginning?
Yes. This video is it's talking about pyramids. All right. We're not here to talk about pyramids or anything like that, but it discusses a little tiny segment about the Ark and its comparison to Egypt. And so that's what we want to highlight. Okay. So it's going to begin talking about pyramids, but that's not what we're here to do today.
What if the Great Pyramid of Giza wasn't built to be used as a tomb for the pharaohs of ancient Egypt? What could its real purpose be? A project called Scan Pyramids analyzed the ancient structure with advanced equipment. And researchers detected thermal anomalies inside the Great Pyramid. This revealed some details we've never considered. The thermal anomaly inside the Great Pyramid isn't something hard to understand. It is believed that the temperature inside the pyramid stays constant and also equals the average temperature of the Earth, 68 degrees Fahrenheit. It's possible that the Great Pyramid of Giza was a giant energy machine, built with ancient technology that has been lost to today. What if the Great Pyramid of Giza has some missing pieces? What if there are ancient components that have been taken from the pyramid? Besides the top of the pyramid, is it possible that there are things from inside that have vanished over the millennia? We still do not know for sure what was located on top of the Great Pyramid. But what if in addition to the top piece, there are other things gone from inside? What if we suggest a connection between the Great Pyramid and the Ark of the Covenant? The book of Exodus says, God summoned Moses to the peak of the holy mountain, giving him 2 stone tablets that were carved with the 10 commandments. At that moment, God also gave Moses the exact instructions and precise dimensions on how to build the Ark of the Covenant.
So we just read that.
Curiously, this is the exact same size as the stone chest or sarcophagus that is in the king's chamber in the Great Pyramid in Egypt.
I want to make sure you heard that.
Stone chest or sarcophagus that
Hold on.
is the exact same size as the stone chest or sarcophagus that is in the king's chamber in the Great Pyramid in Egypt. This coffer was the only object within the king's chamber, just like the ark was the single sacred object within the Holy of Holies. The pyramid was built and sealed long before the days of Moses. There is no natural explanation for the phenomenon of both structures having identical volume measurements. Scholars say, when the massive structure was first constructed, the final portion to be levitated into place was the gleaming gold and crystal capstone. They suggest it contained the original Ark of the Covenant, brought possibly from Atlantis. The Bible explains the constructed box is to contain the commandments. And not only did it carry the 10 Commandments of God, but it was said to be the throne of God himself. Wherever the Ark of the Covenant went, God did too. The entire ark was plated with gold. And a crown of gold was put around it. This could have been for the insulating properties of gold. 4 rings of gold were attached to its 4 feet, 2 on each side, and through these rings staves of shittim wood plated with gold were placed to carry it. All good insulators. They were told, these were never to be removed. A golden cover was placed above the ark, also called kaporit. There are numerous researchers that have suggested if the construction details of the ark that were recorded in the past were used today, then the ark would basically resemble an electrical capacitor. It would have 2 electrodes separated by insulator drivers. Among the many lessons to be found in the Bible, prominent among them is look, but don't touch. When an Israelite named Uzzah laid hands upon the Ark of the Covenant, he was struck down by God. Its size and contents could have delivered 100,000 deadly volts to the unexpected. And it seems it happened again and again. The ark that was made out of acacia wood and covered with gold is very similar to other artifacts that have been found in Egypt. The ark was placed in a dry room where the natural magnetic field is usually 500 or 600 volts per vertical meter. Accordingly, this would have made it possible to charge it through the golden crown that surrounded it. Also suggesting that the Ark of the Covenant would have acted as a capacitor.
Okay, I'm going to stop this one here. Let me see here. Yeah, I'm going to stop this one here. The main thing I wanted you to hear was, what's that? Yes. The main thing I wanted you to hear was that they found an object with the exact same dimensions as the Ark of the Covenant, in a structure that had been sealed way before the time of Moses and the Ark of the Covenant. And
I want to add this too. What they showed, that sarcophagus, how you say it? Sarcophagus. Mm-hmm. That's actually in Indiana Jones. If you remember Indiana Jones, do you remember? Okay, they lowered into the snake pit, right? Mm-hmm. Him and Salah, that's his assistant or his buddy or whatever, and they went into that snake pit. A whole nother thing, anyway. And that's where they found the Ark of the Covenant. Now, the Ark was in the similar, they tell you this kind of stuff. It was out. I have the movie on right now, but anyway, they had the Ark wasn't just sitting there. They had to lift the lid off of what you just saw, that stone thing, and the Ark was sitting in there. Mm-hmm. So in the movie Raiders of the Lost Ark, what we just showed you is in that movie. And it's the same in this, according to this, it's the same dimensions as the actual ark as is described in the Bible. So I wanted to add that too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let's go to this document that we're going to make available to you. This document was written by a gentleman by the name of Scott Nogel. He's a professor of biblical ancient Near Eastern studies at the University of Washington. He's written multiple books, and we're going to look at one of his papers today called The Egyptian Origin of the Ark of the Covenant. And Dwayne's going to pull that up here in a second. And what we're doing is we're not going to read this whole paper. We've got some pieces highlighted, some high points highlighted that we're going to touch on today.
Okay, I'm just scrolling, trying to get to the beginning, and then
No worries.
keep an eye on the chat. Let me go ahead and I'll put the link in the chat for you, okay, so that you guys can download it as you want here. Let me go ahead and I'm pasting it in there right now, and download it so that you can have your copy. And
Okay, perfect.
go.
Yeah, and Atsar, that's literally when I said I could say something, but I'm not going to go there. You know, Atsar said, I've been thinking about the ark. I wondered if the ark was designed by the Most High, carried out by our people. Why would there have been two graven images on it? And I was going to start talking about that when I was reading it, and I said, you know what? Let me not even go there. But that's a very good point.
How about that, Atsar? How about that?
That's exactly where my mind went.
How about that?
As we're talking about it.
Let me see if I make it. I'm just going to make it a little bit. Is that fine?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
good.
All
That's
right,
good.
good.
That's
So-
good. And then in a minute, we're going to bring up something from your text.
And then you keep talking. I'm going to
Okay.
move this over here. So trying to get it where.
Okay, gotcha.
big
All right,
face.
so The Egyptian Origin of the Ark of the Covenant by Scott B. Nogle, okay? And so we're just going to read this abstract, which basically tells you his angle on this paper. So it says the best non-Israelite parallel to the Ark of the Covenant comes not from Mesopotamia or Arabia, but from Egypt. The sacred bark, B-A-R-K, bark, not ark, but bark, was a ritual object deeply embedded in the Egyptian ritual and mythological landscapes. It was carried aloft in processions or pulled in a sledge or a wagon. Its purpose was to transport a god or a mummy and sometimes to dispense oracles. The Israelite conception of the ark probably originated under the Egyptian influence in the late Bronze Age. Okay, so that's his assertion, right? In terms of what we're going to cover in this paper. Now, can you bring up this your text messages, please, Dwayne? We're just going to pop an image up. You don't have to even get out of what you're in. And this one right here. So we're going to touch on most of these here today. And you'll see it in a second. Okay. All right. So the five features of the ark. Okay. We're going to touch on some of these and do a kind of a comparison to the Egyptian artifacts. Okay. First, it was built using a wooden box. Second, you had the lid, the mercy seat. Third, you had the pair of cherubim with wings touching. Fourth, wooden poles that were inserted through the rings to carry, and only the priests could carry it. 5, the contents: tablets of the law, jar of manna, rod of Aaron. Okay, so we're going to look at some of these things and how they parallel what was done in Egypt. Okay, let's take that down, and we'll go ahead and jump in. And I'll try to read this kind of quickly, you all, so we can move through it pretty quickly. Okay, all right, so. Oh, it does kind of keep going. All right, starting on the left-hand side, while some have looked into Mesopotamia and pre-modern Bedouin, I don't know how to say that, societies for parallels to the Ark, the parallels have remained unconvincing and have contributed to the general view that the Ark was uniquely Israelite. But today, the writer says, I propose that we can gain greater insight into the Israelite Ark and the narratives in which it appears by looking to a hitherto overlooked parallel, the Egyptian sacred bark. All right. So all of these things we're going to be showing you pictures today are pictures, if you will, of Egyptian sacred barks. All right. So let's go. Ark of the Covenant. This section down here that's highlighted in the right, it just goes over what we have already discussed in terms of the dimensions, but we'll just hit it real quickly. The first is a wooden box. The Hebrew word, forgive the pronunciation, is aron. Very interesting that sounds like Aaron. But anyway, Aaron, roughly 4 feet by 2.5 by 2.5 and overlaid with gold. The second is a lid, Hebrew kaporeth, made entirely of gold, not plated like the box, which contains a molding running along its top edge. The third component is a pair of gold cherubim. I'm scrolling, y'all. I.e. sphinxes. Okay, because again, we're making this parallel to Egypt, that rest on the top of the lid and face each other with their wings touching. Note that the lid was understood as God's throne, whereas the box was viewed as his footstool. 1 Chronicles 28:2, 2 Chronicles 9:18, Psalms 99:5, and Psalms 132:7. The ark's fourth feature was its wooden poles, which were inserted through 4 gold rings and never removed. Only the priestly tribe of Levi was permitted to carry the ark, and even then, only after they had veiled it. Exodus 40, verse 3, Exodus 40, verse 21. No one of non-priestly descent was allowed to touch it. The ark's fifth feature was its contents: the tablets of the law, Deuteronomy 10:1 through 5, Aaron, Habereth, Exodus 25:22, Aaron, Hayadueth, I don't know. Again, it's Hebrew, so you can see that on your screen. A jar of manna, Exodus 16:33 through 34, and possibly the rod of Aaron. Okay, now Hebrews 9:4 says that the rod of Aaron, the branch which had died but still budded, was inside the box. Why does this? Okay, this is already. All right, we're going to scoot over to the right-hand side. Most prominently, it served as the symbolic presence of Yahweh. In times of war, Yahweh, and they're going to use the word Yahweh all throughout this, okay? In times of war, Yahweh led as the Lord of hosts, sitting upon the cherubim or cherubim, surrounded by standard bearers preceding him. Each standard was topped with a banner representing an Israelite tribe or family line. That's in Numbers 2, Numbers 10, Psalms 132. As the symbolic presence of Yahweh, the ark was connected to miracles and oracles. Thus, when the priests carried the ark into the Jordan River, the waters parted. And Moses, Phinehas, Samuel, Saul, and David each received divine direction from the ark. You can find that in Exodus 25, Numbers 7, Judges 20, 1 Samuel 3. You can go ahead and read the rest of the scripture references there. It'd be great if I could page down, Dwayne, instead of having to scroll.
You can.
Okay. Oh, I gotcha. Okay. All right. Very good. All right. There's nothing on that page. Okay. Gotcha. I got it. Okay. So now we're going to start and we're going to jump into this. Egyptian sacred barks. So he goes on to write, I would like to propose that the Egyptian sacred bark offers a more compelling, when he says more compelling, previously he looked at some other cultures and showed how their arcs, if you will, really don't have that much of a compelling comparison with Israelite arcs. But now he's moving into Egyptian culture and design of these sacred barks. I would like to propose that the Egyptian sacred bark offers a more compelling and complete parallel for the ark. Of course, the bark was not merely a boat, but a sacred ritual object deeply embedded in the ritual and mythological landscapes of the Egyptians. Although they resembled boats, they rarely, if ever, were set in water. Even when they needed to cross the Nile, they were loaded onto barges. Usually, they were carried by hand or in some cases dragged on a sledge or placed on a wagon. The bark's most basic function was to transport gods and mummies. When transporting gods, the bark was filled with a gold-plated naos containing a divine image. Let's page down. Sorry.
And then you want to point
I'm going to. Yeah. Hold on.
Let's make it smaller. Hold on. I got you. Where are you? Right here?
Yeah. All right. Because that picture is not for what I'm.
Okay.
Yeah. Seated on a block throne, which was veiled with a thin canopy of wood or cloth. Sorry, y'all. Can you unhighlight that? Thank you. Okay, so we can stay right there. So what you're looking at right now is you're looking at Egyptian barks on stands with carrying poles. Okay, so you can see where his mouse is there. All right, so that's showing the Egyptian bark and showing the carrying poles. All right, underneath it. Okay, we can keep going.
Next page.
Oh, right there. Okay. All right, very good. One second. Okay, so even these Egyptian barks, they were veiled with a thin canopy of wood or cloth. When transporting the dead, it carried the sarcophagus with a covered gold-plated catafalque. I'm not sure how to say that. There is no one type of sacred bark, but rather many variations on a theme, each with its own set of accoutrements. So many barks were decorated with protective cherubim, such as the naos of the bark of Amun. It's gonna speed up, y'all, in just a second. But this picture here that you see, this is the veiled bark of Amun. Let me make this one bigger so you can see that. So this here, where my mouse is showing the veil over the bark. Okay, so you see, hopefully you can see my mouse going back and forth. This is the bark. And you see this box here, and this white kind of cloud looking thing is the veil. All right, so I'm just.
Before you move, and then on. Sorry.
Go ahead.
And then over here on the right hand side down here, you can see, again, you see them, they're carrying the bark, similar to how they would carry the Ark of the Covenant. And take note again of the construction. Even though it looks like a boat, it isn't a boat. And this is how they would carry it, like that. So you see that on the right, and then on the left, which she was just pointing out as well. This white that you see right here, that's the veil that used to be on top of what she just said, the ark or whatever it's called.
That was good how you made the mouse larger just then.
It does that. I don't know how to.
Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. All right, so this we're gonna take a look at a few more pictures, but I'm gonna start reading. Found on Seti's mortuary temple in Qurna, and we'll show that picture in a second, and the bark of Horus in the temple at Edfu. Like the Ark of the Covenant, sacred barks were, again, like we just said, carried on poles by priests. The priests that carried these Egyptian barks, they were the so-called pure ones. They were the Egyptians who had performed purification rituals in order to hoist the bark. Similar to, or in parallel with, the tribe of Levi and the purification rituals that the priests had to go through in order to carry out not only their duties, but also to come in contact with carrying the ark. Though most Egyptian rituals were never witnessed by the public, the procession of the sacred bark was an important exception. Dwayne, you wanted to mention something about that?
Oh, yeah. Now notice what he said there. Though, where is it? Right here on the left-hand side. Oh, here we go. Though most Egyptian rituals were never witnessed by the public. Okay. Now, going back to the video that lady was saying that the Most High wanted them to use things that they were familiar with.
Or the Most High wanted to use something that they were familiar with.
That they were familiar with, right? Mm-hmm. And that's why they were copying, if it appeared that they were copying off of what Egypt was doing. Now, here's the question. What we just read, though most Egyptian rituals were never witnessed to the public. First of all, what we're told according to the biblical narrative was that Israel was in Egypt as slaves. So slaves would not have access to these rituals, right? They would not be in it. We're just reading what's there, right? So slaves wouldn't have any access to that. So then we have to ask the question, who did have access to these rituals? Well, again, according to what's being said here, most Egyptians were not witness to the public. Rituals were never witnessed to the public. Who were the only ones that were in there? It was the priest. Well, who were the priests? Well, it's leading to them not just being quote unquote Egyptian, but also they were Hebrews / Israelites. Well, at that time they were Hebrews or whatever you want to call them. So they would have had access to this, not the public. Because again, they just said not just the public didn't have access to it. So the general public didn't have access to how these things were done. Then you know that the slaves really didn't have any access to it. So the Most High had to. So according to again, when we're looking at this, the only people who had access to it were these priests. And these priests, they were the only ones that would be familiar with this. You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So they weren't just Egyptian priests. These were Hebrew priests that were familiar with it.
And we went over a document in a previous, I think it was last week or the week before. We went over a document that talked about how some of the Israelite priests were worshipers of Horus, and how they were brought into some of these Egyptian practices and were allowed to I don't want to misquote it. I think it's in part 2. We talked about this, the connection between these Hebrew or Israelite priests and these people serving as Egyptian priests. All right. But you can go back and listen to that and review. Let's move ahead a little faster here. On the right hand side, the bark also gave oracles. While resting at one of the stations, it could be consulted by written oracles. And while en route during the procession, it could be asked, this bark, it could be asked a question to which it would respond yes or no by bowing fore or aft. So by moving, it would answer your question. Okay, this is Egyptian bark. Some priests march before the bark, waving or wafting incense, and others alongside and behind. Some bore standards representing gnomes, much like the tribal procession of the Ark of the Covenant. And then he goes on to say, while I know of no sacred bark whose footstool contained relics, the placing of oaths beneath the feet of statues is attested. And then scholars have long likened this practice. Hold on. Okay, here's a picture. They in this document, the pictures normally come after what you just explained. All right, so what you're looking at is the bark of Catafalque, tomb of Usarat. All right, so that's what you're looking at there.
That look like the American flag to me.
Right.
Always.
Okay, just use that. Okay, perfect. All right, so scholars have long likened this practice of to the placing of the covenantal tablets in the ark's footstool. Okay, so what we just said is the author saying, hey, while I know of no sacred bark whose footstool contained relics, the placing of oaths beneath the feet of these statues is attested to. And scholars have long likened this practice to the placing of the covenantal tablets in the ark's footstool. All right. And so this we'll read really quickly. In addition, from the 18th dynasty well into the Roman period, Egyptian fashioned statues of the god, you can read the name there, standing upright on their own coffins. And we're going to go take a look at that in just a second. Of interest here is that the coffins often house copies of the Book of the Dead. So let me just go ahead and show you the picture.
It's gone now.
Because this is, what'd you say, it's gone?
That's it. Just go on ahead.
All right, hold on. That was figure. That was figure 7-7. All right, so that's going to be on the next page. So this is figure 7-7. This is Ta Sokar Osiris, Ptah, standing on his coffin. So this is what they're saying, where you'd have the likeness of one of their gods, and then underneath you'd have the box, the coffin, the aron, and they would place their oaths in that box. Okay, so that's what they're likening to the oaths, or the commandments that Israel agreed to, the tablets that were placed in the ark. Okay. All right. So y'all, thank you for kind of bearing with us going back and forth, because these pictures are a little all over the place. So now I'm going back up. You got to go back up one more. And underneath that. Hopefully y'all are still with us. All right. So what they're saying here is, of interest here is that the coffins often housed copies of the Book of the Dead, or small corn mummies. While the Ramside letter and the statue are not exact parallels to the ark, they share a concept of text placed beneath the feet of a god. All right. So that's why we showed that. Even from this cursory treatment, it should be clear that the ark, the Israelite ark, and the Egyptian bark, all right, share much in common in both design and function, and each in its own way was connected to and historicized mythology of return. All right, so let's go back.
You want to go to the previous page?
I'll show the picture that you're looking at right now. We can make that maybe a little bigger for them. So they're just showing the cherubim. All right. With the outstretched wings. Okay.
So you see that right here, y'all, it's like dink, 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 dink. You see that? And it's like, looks like greater than, less than, or whatever. You see that? Go ahead. And then the same thing on the right hand side as well. It's even clearer on the right hand side.
Okay. And let's reduce the size, and we're going to keep going.
And remember, I posted that on the community page too. I gave a couple of examples as well. And then what's in the middle, that's one was I can't remember. It's not Osiris. I think one may be Osiris, and it was another god in there as well. That space in the middle where the two wings touch is considered a holy place, is considered sacred. Anytime you see that, if you're ever looking at hieroglyphics, you know, when the two wings are touching like that, it usually means that in the middle, it's something sacred. Sometimes you'll see it and it's the sun. Well, the sun god, Ra. Okay, so you'll see that as well too. All right.
Okay, let's go down.
On this same page? All right.
Okay, nevertheless, some of the barks. Okay, why is he saying nevertheless? He's saying, you can stop right there. He's saying, hey, I'm not suggesting that the Ark of the Covenant was in fact an Egyptian bark, but that the bark served as a model, okay, which the Israelites adapted for their own needs, okay? Nevertheless, some of the bark's other aspects remained meaningful in Israelite priestly culture. It still represented a throne and a footstool, and so it served as a symbol of the divine presence, like he just said. It continued to be a sacred object that one could consult for oracles, and its maintenance continued to be the exclusive privilege of the priests. Moreover, this is important, moreover, there is evidence that it retained the chthonic import. When you see that word chthonic, CHTHONIC, it means related to the underworld, okay? Moreover, there is evidence that it retained its chthonic import of its Egyptian prototype. In part, this comes from the very name that the Israelites gave the object, an Aaron, which also, and perhaps primarily, means coffin. Now, Aaron means box, ark, coffin. Okay? As such, it appears, and again, here's the thing. Would the Holy 10 Commandments be related and placed and housed in something that was representative of death? These are questions, right? These are things that are very strange and odd. Anyway, as such, it appears in the narratives concerning the deaths of the patriarch Jacob and his son Joseph, both of whom were embalmed according to Egyptian practice and placed in an Aaron. You can see that in Genesis 50:26 and Genesis 51-14.
And then you can go into the Strongs, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And it's in there. It's Aaron. It's in there.
Yeah, I'll get the number for you. I'll get the number for you. All right, let's go back, or let's go down. We're getting towards a break here in a second. I'm going to show you something here in a second. Okay. All right. So actually this is the break. Okay. We're about to talk about the threshing floors. All right. I'm going to show you what a threshing floor looks like. And we're going to watch a 1-minute video so you can see how a threshing floor works. Why are we doing this? I'm going to read this one part here and then we're going to take a look at it. Underscoring the chthonic nature of the Aaron and its frequent association with threshing floors. That was probably a continuation of a sentence on the previous page, so I apologize for that, but you guys have the link to the document. See, for example, the account of Joseph's return to Canaan. Right, this is in Genesis 50. When they reached the threshing floor of the bramble near the Jordan, they lamented loudly and bitterly, and there Joseph observed a 7-day period of mourning for his father. When the Canaanites who lived there saw the mourning at the threshing floor of the bramble, they said, "The Egyptians are holding a solemn ceremony of mourning."
Uh-oh.
That is why that place near the Jordan is called Abel Mitzrayim, literally the mourning of the Egyptians.
Oh.
Genesis 50. So the Canaanites who lived near the Jordan saw the Israelites having a burial ceremony and a mourning ceremony. And they said, look, the Egyptians, they're holding a solemn ceremony. Why did they say that? Why would they assume that these Israelites were Egyptian? Well, we're going to take a look at that. I want to show you. Actually, sorry.
And the assumption is while she's doing that is that, well, Joseph, he was second in command. So, so of course, being second command in Egypt, he's, there's certain, he's just doing it in the tradition of, he's just using some of the privileges he has and how to bury his father and all of that. Notice all this inferring I got to do to try to explain that. And that's what they do in the movies, right? So let's clear all that inferring out. Let's take all of that out. And so again, but we'll allow some of it and just say, okay, well, maybe that's the case. Maybe that's the case. Joseph was just being an Egyptian royal, if you will. What were you pointing to? Being an Egyptian royal, he was just simply using, just the formalities, if you will, of Egypt. But there's more to that. Okay. There's more you have to consider if you're going to go there. Okay. All right. So you tell me what.
Let's do this one at the bottom.
Okay.
All right. So while he's bringing that up, while the text mentions the presence, we're talking about the same in Genesis 50, right? The account of Joseph's return to Canaan. While the text mentions the presence of Egyptian officials, they were far outnumbered by the elders of Israel. The household of Joseph and his brothers and all the members of their father's household. Indeed, Genesis 50 verse 9 states that the group constituted an exceeding large camp. Even the length of the event, 7 days, suggests an Israelite mourning practice. Instead, the narrator twice states that the rite took place at a threshing floor. All right, so what you're looking, you can't really see it too clearly, but this is forget about all the writing around there. I just wanted to grab the image. All right, so the image illustrates a threshing floor. All right, so in the middle, you've got the wheat here. The wheat and the barley is here. And what happens is you throw the wheat here.
They're not going to see your pointer.
Oh, they don't see my pointer? Okay. All right. Okay. Well, you'll see it in the.
Describe it.
Yeah, I'll just describe it. So that mound in the middle, that's where your wheat and your barley go. From there, you're going to toss the wheat and barley down in that circle form. You see that circle formation? That's where the wheat gets thrown down, and then the oxen trample over it and they separate the wheat, on the inside from the hard casing, the outer shell, which is not edible, right? So they trample over it. Then you have the person, right, that's sitting on that flat sled, so to speak, right, spreads it out. And then you see the people with the forks, right? It's a willowing fork. So after you can take this off for a second. Mm-hmm. We can just go right back here. I go right back here.
Wait. Oh, okay. Let me. I got it.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So after the oxen trampled all over the wheat and it was broken apart, where you have the wheat that's edible inside, and then you have the hard casing that's been broken off. All right. You have the oxen that are pulling and you saw the picture, the man on that sled, right, evening it all out. And then you saw the people with the forks, the willowing forks, and that you lift up the wheat so that the air, you can fan it and it separates the wheat from the chaff. Okay. And so that whole process is what's happening at the threshing floor. Okay. So let's go to the next picture.
That you sent me?
And your text. And then it's a 1-minute video after we look at this picture, just so you can kind of see. All right. So you see that maybe it's a little bit more clear. All right. You see everything I just described. You see the people to the left, they're forking and fanning. All right. And they're making a pile of the edible wheat. Okay. So that's what's happening at a threshing floor. Let's take a look at the video, which is also in your text. It's a 1-minute video. And it is, 1 second. Go up. This one right here. We don't even have to look at the whole one minute. And this may not be exactly how it was done as described in the word, but it just gives you an idea. And there's an ad coming up. Uh-oh, that's not it. That's not it. Here you go. It's there. has a text in it too, probably. Okay, good. All right. I don't think they can see it.
I know.
Okay. And we're going to bring all this together, y'all, in just a second. We're almost done. Threshing and winnowing wheat to remove the grain the old way. So you see that? I don't even know why I tried to explain it to y'all. I could have just shown it to you. So obviously they're using horses, not oxen. You see the man on the sled there. You see the pile of the wheat in the middle. And they might show, there's the, that right there. I can't tell if he's putting the wheat on the track to be threshed or if that was the winnowing. Oh, this might be the winnowing here. It's hard to tell, y'all, but you can kind of get an idea of what's happening. All right. Let me see if there's anything else. Scroll forward on this video. Let's see. Yeah. So you get an idea of kind of get a concept of a threshing floor. So let's go back, Dwayne. So we can just talk about real quick before we close out what the significance of that, why I even showed that. And while he's bringing it up, I'm just going to start to read, y'all. Okay. So we were talking about why the Canaanites thought, next page, why the Canaanites thought that this was an Egyptian practice, an Egyptian mourning practice, right? Because there were so many Israelites there. They far outnumbered the Egyptians. The mourning practice was going on for 7 days. So why would they think it was Egyptian? So let's look at that. The Canaanites identified the mourning ritual as an Egyptian practice. Because they did that, we must ask more specifically what cultic significance the threshing floor had in Egypt. In Egypt, the threshing floor was most widely associated with Osiris and his cult. Suffice it to say that he was connected basically to the resurrection of the dead. This is Osiris. Okay. The identification of Osiris with new grain is attested abundantly in the mythological corpora, as well as in ritual practices such as the making of corn mummies and Osiris beds. The rites found in the dramatic Ramses papyrus and the driving of the calves. The latter rite, which is the driving of the calves, this is Egyptian, was enacted at a number of public festivals. Now, hear this, during which the threshing of grain was interpreted as the dismemberment of Osiris. After mourning over Osiris, his members, meaning, the parts of his body, were reunited, reinvigorated, and concealed beneath the threshing floor. I hope y'all are still awake. All right. Since the mourning rites for Osiris took place at a threshing floor, we perhaps can understand why the Canaanites perceived the Israelites mourning for Jacob as an Egyptian event, because it's happening at a threshing floor. And while the narrator does not offer more than twofold mention of the threshing floor by way of explanation, the references to an embalming of the patriarchs and their internments in an Aron naturally evoke an Egyptian, if not Osirian, subtext. So we're making a correlation between Israelite burial rites and customs at the threshing floor and Egyptian association and customs regarding the threshing floor. Okay. Additional support comes from a number. I don't think I'm going to read this part because this part is from the Talmud and the Midrash, and it doesn't really add doesn't really add much. Okay, so we'll skip that part. And I'll go down here. Let's see, mid-page on the right-hand column. Moreover, like the Egyptian Aaron, in which the patriarchs were buried, the Ark of the Covenant was associated with new grain and the threshing floor. Thus we find that the Ark's miraculous crossing of the Jordan took place during harvest time. Okay, and then it goes in, it talks about the association with Osiris and Dagon. The Hebrew word for grain is Dagon. All right. So again, we've made this possible, made this available to you. But there's something I want to mention. The threat. Go ahead.
Hold on one moment, y'all.
Okay. He told me to stick to what I was going to share because y'all know I start rushing once it gets to be a certain time. I will read that part then from the Talmudic sources, right? Because what do they say? What do they write about this? Additional support comes from a number of Talmudic and Midrashic traditions, which Rivka Ulmer has shown to draw heavily upon Osiris mythology when discussing the burial of Joseph in an aron or coffin and the bringing of his bones back to Canaan. Like Osiris, Joseph is said to be buried among the kings and also in the Nile. According to Midrash, okay, this is Hebrew stuff, Jewish stuff, right? The Egyptians placed Joseph in a metal coffin and buried him in the Nile in order to bless the river with fertility. Later, Moses summons the coffin from the water by using language and paraphernalia suggestive of Egyptian magic. The footnote 49 basically just gives you scripture reference that Moses was learned in Egyptian magic appears also in Acts 7, verse 22. When the coffin surfaces, it is then compared to a sprouting stalk of reed. Moses then carries the coffin away on his shoulders, much like a sacred bark, with all of Israel in procession. So that's the part I just wanted to fill in. Again, that's from Talmudic sources. Okay. And they're just emphasizing the Egyptian influence.
And I got that scripture, Acts 7:22. It says, and Moses was instructed in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and he was mighty in words and deeds. So all the wisdom of the Egyptians, that's not just understanding how to add up 2 + 2. Their wisdom included all of these quote unquote sacred sciences and things like that as well. So it gives a new perspective even on that passage when we read it. I just wanted to read that. So
that's good because I forgot about that. That's good. Thank you. That's very, very good.
Uh-huh.
This part, I just want you to hear this part. Okay. It's not highlighted, but when David conquered Jerusalem, he purchased the city's main threshing floor after encountering an angel there. 2 Samuel 24:16 and 17. He then built an altar on the spot in order to avert a plague, which the Septuagint places during the wheat harvest. Let's scroll down. That same city's main threshing floor became the site on which Solomon built the temple. 1 Kings 6:19, 8:1-9, 2 Chronicles 3:4. What this is saying now is that David purchased a threshing floor, built an altar there, so on and so forth. That same site became the site on which Solomon built his temple, according to the text, right? According to the Bible. Okay. The Masonic the whole Masonic heritage is built around Solomon's temple. We've taken you inside Masonic temples that are full of Egyptian images, Egyptian writings, Egyptian, replicas, full of it, right? So, and the threshing floor, which in Egyptian culture is linked synonymously with Osiris, right? So when you and I were talking about this and how the Solomon's temple was built on a threshing floor, all right, and how according to Egyptian, culture and mythology, if you will, Osiris, after being dismembered and the people mourned, then he's remembered again, meaning his body comes back together and he's buried under the threshing floor. And how is it that, and we've shown you quotes and information and about how there is no Masonic culture without Judaism. Judaism is built into the fabric of Masonic belief, Masonic mysticism. And how is it that, there's just so much here that links you back to Egypt.
And to add to
these writings.
And to add to what they're saying here with the burial under the threshing floor. Now, when you look at the royal family, the British, the British family, the British royals, when they're buried, they're always buried, not outside somewhere near the highway. They bury them under the church. So when you go into the main cathedrals and stuff like that, you will find that royalty is always buried under the floor of the church. That's where they get that. And these people also believe, when you listen to them, and many of y'all have seen this video that's been floating around for some time, is that even people in the British royal monarchy or whatever, they actually do believe that they are part of this coming out of Egypt. There's a lot of things they do that are throwbacks, if you will, to how Egypt rolls, when it comes to that. So the royal family does this. And also just in a lot of these older churches, you'll find all throughout, not just here in the United States, but particularly out in over across Europe, you'll find when you go into those old churches, they would bury the people who were the big whatnots or whatever in that day in the floor of the church. So you walk in, going up to the offering bucket or whatever, and you stepping over, oh, that's where they buried so-and-so. So this is where it comes from. And so now we see, now it's like she's bringing out here where this actually started. Who started that? That's Osiris. And then we got David, like she just mentioned, all of a sudden now he's, he bought that, established that, which are the threshing floor. And now here comes later on his son Solomon establishing this temple, which later on, as we know, is the foundation of how Freemasonry began. So we see this Freemasonry kind of practice being established all over, even till to this day. But this is the origin of it. This is where it comes from.
And just to finish this out, because we're done, and then just to finish this out. All right, let me just read this last part, and then I'm going to just give you some thoughts on this. While the ark and the bark basically share much in common in design, function, and cosmic import. Okay, I'm going to skip that. On the right, the Canaanite elites often sought to emulate Egyptian customs. Now, we've talked about how Hebrews that live over in present day Israel, right? So Jewish people descend from Canaanites. So we've talked talked about that. We've looked at their writing, their script. We've talked about, because their script coming from Ugarit, Canaanite, then Hebrew. We've talked about how, and last week we even talked about, even prior to that, how the ancient Hebrew script mimics Egyptian hieroglyphs, right? So we talked about that last week. But Hebrews descend from Canaanites, okay? Even what is it? Encyclopedia, what is it? National Geographic did a study that modern day Jewish people have 50% Canaanite DNA, okay?
And then we showed the video where the man actually went over there and asked on themselves, and they were like, yeah, I think so.
Or they were like, we don't know. So reading here, the Canaanites, meanwhile, often sought to emulate Egyptian customs. Of course, they did not adopt Egyptian practices wholesale, but they adapted them to fit their own religion, as Beth Nakai observes. All right, this is from her either book or paper. It's all in the footnotes. These temples blended Egyptian structural or decorative elements with Canaanite architectural forms. Egyptian ritual and other objects were found alongside Canaanite cultic paraphernalia. Iconography often exhibited qualities of synthesis rather than exclusivity. But in general, the gods and goddesses of Canaan prevailed. What they're saying here is that the Canaanites sought to emulate Egyptian customs, and then they synthesized them into their own, to fit their own religions. Who are the Canaanites? They are Jewish people. And this whole series really talks about the influence that Jewish people have had on the Old Testament. Of course, obviously the Talmud, but as well the Old Testament. Okay, so that's why how all these things are connected. Lastly, the late Bronze Age also saw movements of Canaanites and Egyptians in both directions, and it is at this time when how do you pronounce that? Merneptah? I'm not sure. Stele records the earliest written evidence for Israelites in Canaan. This was a formative and flexible period in the history of Israelite religion, and it also saw the gradual fusion of the Canaanite god El, who the El are you following, with Yahweh. However, of particular relevance here are a great many seals, scarabs, and other objects found in Canaan, which Othmar Keel has shown attest to the Canaanites' fascination with Memphis, which is Egypt, and its god Ptah. I don't know if the P is silent or not. Okay.
And then to add to, remember, going back to King Hezekiah, you remember I showed you what they discovered. They said this was an actual his seal, his royal seal that they found, where it had those Egyptian symbols on there. It had the Ankh on there, and then it had the winged sun on there as well. So that's just, and this is King Hezekiah, who, according to the Bible, was considered one of the greatest kings of Israel. But according to this finding that they discovered here, he may have been a great king, but he also was one that was very in close connection with all of this culture here. And for one, and again, to go back to that, you know, for people may say, well, they just kind of threw that in there. Maybe that was just planted there. But you also have to take in consideration of, like this article or this paper is saying, of all the references, and we showed you quite a bit of all the other things that they have found all throughout. They're saying Canaan, but it's Israel, what they call Israel. All of these things that they find and they still are discovering all throughout that land that are all Egyptian in nature. I mean, and it ain't just little ringlets and stuff like that. They finding whole tombs that were constructed in a way that it was like the Egyptian way. There was another thing that I didn't think to bring it on this week, but they also found a space, and I can, like I said, maybe next week or whatever, I'll bring it up, where it's believed that an ark was there as well. An ark of the covenant, or an ark type device was there as well. Because, and then what they found, but they said it's strange because, again, that same thing that Nicole showed earlier, like that little, that cement looking thing where the ark would sit in. Well, they found something similar to that in what they call today Israel. Same, I believe it was the same dimensions and everything. Yeah, it was. Now I remember it. Now I'm remembering the article. And what was strange was that people were like, well, we're looking at the artifacts that we found around it, and all of them are Egyptian. So they found just what she showed earlier. There's something similar to that they found in Israel. Same thing, but it has all this Egyptian stuff around it. And they're like, well, wait a minute now. Does that mean there was some things dedicated to other gods up in this thing? And so anyway.
The camera.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, yeah, I'm done. I just wanted to share that.
I wasn't telling you to stop. I was just saying you could bring the camera back up. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And something recently just got discovered. Mm-hmm. So these are the final thoughts of this writer, Scott Nogel.
And you guys, I want to make sure too, you guys, I put the link in the chat. I want to make sure people, you got it. You have the link and all of that. If it's there. So, and then I'll do a post maybe tomorrow or Monday, maybe on a community page, and I'll post it there as well, just in case you can't get it now. But yeah. All right. I just want to make sure you guys didn't have any problems getting that. Okay.
And can you bring up this slide here? And so the writer's, his final thoughts are, as the centerpiece of the Israelite sanctuary, the Ark of the Covenant stood as the symbolic presence of Yahweh and his legitimation of the Levitical priesthood. As the Lord of hosts who rides upon the cherubim, the Ark legitimated the royal house and its wars. As an Egyptian object, transformed and deturned, it offered visual and literary validation of the Exodus. Here's the thing. And we're done reading. So those of you that are still with us, I wanted Dwayne to bring up a slide that this will be probably your third time, fourth time seeing this slide. Keep going. There it is, right there. Right there. This slide here that you're about to see, as we read these things, when we said that we do not call ourselves Israelites, when people first saw this, your mind can say, okay, well, they're saying Israel, ISIS, Ra'el. Okay, whatever. I see where they're going with it. I mean, it's, okay. I see you've got the similar lettering and sounds, but no. What you're seeing as we're reading these different things and these different similarities, Isis, Ra, and El. What did I just read at the end of that document? That the Canaanites were so very enamored with Egyptian culture. And who are the Canaanites? They are the Jewish people. Israel, right? Canaanites. So when I say Canaanites and Israel, right, I think sometimes your mind can go on tilt because you're like, wait a minute. No, in the Bible, the Canaanites were the enemies of the Israelites. I'm saying today, the people in the nation state of Israel, Jewish people, descend from Canaanites, and their God was El, right? And what we also are learning is that there's so much of this happening between so-called Israelites of the Bible and Egyptians. Okay, there's this meshing that's happening between the two, which brings even more validation to when we say Isis, Ra, and El. Isis and Ra are Egyptian deities. El is a Canaanite deity. Now you see, as we talked about, how the Canaanites are so enamored with Egypt. Why this name now is, I don't want to be anywhere near it. Okay, because it doesn't mean what they told you it meant. And so now when we look at, as we're done, when we look at some of the things that we've covered, right? So we covered, when we look at the Old Testament, the holy city, Jerusalem, and in the age to come, the new Jerusalem, which again is supposed to be all things made right. The new Jerusalem. This is it. This is going to be it. His people reigning with him. And then we find out that Jerusalem means founded by or established by or established for, which is the Uru, Shalem or Salem, which is a Canaanite or Phoenician god of the dusk. So your most holy city, and that city, in that culture, the city sat on a hill. So you find that the most holy city, that was their stuff, right? Uru Shalem, Yerushalem. That's their stuff. A city dedicated to a Phoenician or a Canaanite deity. Then last week we looked at the tent and the tabernacle and how the setup of the tabernacle and the tents, the Sukkot, and how you have the outer court, the inner court, the Holy of Holies, with all the tents surrounding it. Again, one of the most sacred, gatherings and formations in the Old Testament. I may have said new earlier, Old Testament. We looked at it last week. Item for item, pound for pound, it's exactly the same as the Egyptian war formation, with Pharaoh's tent in the very middle. And it had an outer and inner court, and then the main, like, most sacred place in the center. And now tonight, we're looking at one of the most significant pieces of the Old Testament. If you are a Bible believer, okay, all of us, we've lived most of our adult lives living, believing, reading, following the Bible. One of the most significant pieces of the Old Testament is the Ark of the Covenant. Why? Because it contains the 10 Commandments upon which all the rest of the laws are built. So it's one of the most significant, if not the most significant pieces of the Old Testament. And now we went all the way around reading this document to show how it mirrors the Egyptian sacred bark in form, because they said there was some variation in form, but in form, in function, in the details, in dimensions, it's Egyptian. So there's no way that I'm going to call myself an Israelite. But going further than that, if these huge tenets and pillars of the Old Testament upon which this Bible is built are Egyptian in origin, because again, all of these things were present in Egypt long before we saw them occur with Moses and even as we talked about the threshing floor. Again, that's Osiris and his dismemberment and rememberment, and then buried underneath the threshing floor. And all throughout the Bible, burial rites happen at threshing floors. And why? Why in Egyptian culture were burial rites happening? Not burial rites, but why was the threshing floor so significant? It was so that Osiris would bless you with good harvest and new grain. You know what I mean? And so all throughout the Bible, we have Israelites having burial rites and mourning rites at threshing floors. Another Egyptian practice. And so again, I know that, that was a little bit cumbersome going through all of that, but I don't want to be deceived, right? I don't want to be deceived. I don't want to be deceived. Nor do I want to hold on to a deception because it's too difficult to face that it could be a deception, right? So whoever said this quote, I don't know, but I'm going to paraphrase, but it's easier to lie to a man than convince him that he's been lied to. Because our minds will try to reason all these different reasons why this, well, it can't be that. It can't be that. It's like the COVID people. It can't be the vaccine. It's not the vaccine. Now, I just have a cold. It's not the vaccine. My immune system isn't compromised. Likewise, this isn't Egypt. I mean, how do you know that they're not just lying and they didn't just place those artifacts there? And how, like, literally your mind will try to make things up to make the deception the real.
To make it make sense.
To make it make sense. And so again, like we have been saying, we are not jumping all the way to a conclusion, because to do that, it would be premature and it would be prideful, because we don't know enough to jump to a conclusion. So we're not doing that. But we are uncovering, and we are reading this stuff, and we are looking at this stuff, and we are not ignoring these similarities, and really it's really Xerox copies. You know what I'm saying? And it's not something to be ignored. It isn't. It isn't. But I'm not going to put on, look, people have gone from the Christian church, some of y'all wore them dollies on your heads and stuff, to Hebrew Israelite, and we put on whatever else, to Bantu, right? But trying to drink all of it. We're not drinking all of it. All right. That's where we came from. Yes. But we're not going to take all of those cultural practices and swallow the whole thing. So then people wanted to put on their African garb. I'm gonna wear all my African clothes. You don't know where those clothes come from. I'm definitely not about to put on some Egyptian clothes now.
Definitely not.
Unknowingly, though. Do you know what I'm saying? So it is a lot to unpack, but, and I'm done. I literally keep saying I'm done, but I really am done. It is a lot to unpack, but I for one am very encouraged, because we could continue on and be blind. Do you understand? But it's his mercy that allows us to see. It's his mercy that allows us to see. And quite frankly, earlier on in my life, I've heard different things about things that were off in the Bible, but you slam that door and you say, "Oh, I'm not trying to hear that. That's of the devil. I'm not
Right.
here for it." You trying to see they're just trying to discredit, and they're just trying to So the person asked, "So weren't you following him then? Why wouldn't he tell you that then?" He may have tried to, right? But every time I heard it, I slammed the door on it. But now it's time to to look at it and see it for what it is.
And the thing is, and we're done here, that I went, as this is solely, kind of uncovering. That's why I said I can only go at a slow speed with all of this stuff, is that what's being realized, I guess, is all of this that they talked about the movie, The Matrix is a documentary, is not a movie. It's literally, we are living in their matrix. We're living in their space, their world. Again, when you look at their account of history, they literally block out 90% of Africa. There are, and one day we're going to get into this. There are civilizations that they have discovered, and you have people who are scratching their head, archaeologists. They're like, we don't understand why people aren't even talking about these other civilizations, because here's all the walls here are the buildings and everything else. It's here. We dug this stuff up. Why are we not getting anybody to come down here? Where's National Geographic? Why are these big time folks? Why aren't they not coming down here? It's there. It's literally, you can see it. It's there. And there's civilizations out there. When you get into South Africa, for example, South Africa is known for its gold and all of this stuff. And it goes back when you go back even further than that, remember the, the area where Adam's calendar is. That goes back, according to what they believe, 70,000 years, according to them, before Egypt became what we know today as Egypt. 70,000 years. It predates Egypt by 70,000 years. In India, there was a whole kingdom that they discovered not too long ago. I mean, again, buildings and everything. The technology that they had in these buildings, where they were able to separate, the clean water from the dirty water and all this. And they're like, how did they get all this technology? Where are they getting them? Predates Egypt by over 1,000 years. And India was actually doing trade with kingdoms down in South Africa. But again, it's always pushed to, it's conspiracy theory. Now you get into the other stuff and all, you get into the weird area. It's more than that. They have all the artifacts there. They have all the artifacts. I mean, you can literally see them. I mean, it's all there. And you have people, and more than once, I've heard people say, what's strange is that there's not enough people talking about this, and they don't know why. Well, because again, they wanted to create an entire narrative or an entire construct. We hear the saying, the world is a stage. We're on their stage. Do you understand what I'm saying? And you want to understand why is it, who's the directors of this stage? Yeah. The people they call Jewish. Now you understand why they run Hollywood, because that's what they have to do in order to keep you on the stage and keep you in the theater, to stay on stage so that they can keep you in the narrative. That's why they're more than happy to do Bible videos. They're more than happy to do Bible movies. They're more than happy to do all of these feel-good movies and everything else. Why? Because it keeps you on their narrative. It keeps you on their stage. It keeps you in their theater. This is why from Jump Street, they had to invent Hollywood, because it helps them to create people, to keep people in that narrative.
That's right.
Do you understand what I'm saying? And if you dare question anything outside of it, then you're out, and then you crazy, you weird.
Here comes a plague to get you distracted.
All right. So again, when we come to, and so Jermaine said, is the earth 7,000 years old? We don't know. I can't answer that. I don't know. Because within the Christian world, they'll say, the earth is a little more than 2,000, maybe 3,000 years old. They'll say more than 6,000 years. But again, that's them saying that because, according to their stage production, that's the case. So again, we're just, these things are slowly unraveling, and we have, the key is, and I have to keep saying this over and over again, we have to take our time. A good researcher, a good archaeologist, a good historian, they are only going to be able to tell you what they know at that time. They cannot come up to a final conclusion because they're still discovering, they're still researching, things are still becoming uncovered. And that's what's happening in this case as well. Okay. But there are some definitive things that we can say now. And one of which is, ain't nowhere in the world, you better not call me no Hebrew. You better not call me no Israelite, because I ain't about that life. I ain't about what has already been demonstrated in their text and everything else. Heck no. You can have all of that. But what we believe is that whatever it is that the purposes of the Most High is for us, I'm talking about all of us here, it is something greater than what the stage managers want it to be.
Yeah.
They will never tell you how awesome and how great you really are and what your purpose really is in their books. Isn't that silly now that you think about it? we have for all this time have believed that a book that they gave us is fully going to define just how great and the potential that you have in you. The people that beat you and tortured you and did all that stuff, we're depending on them to tell us really the potential that he put inside of us. Isn't that funny now when you think about that? All of this time.
But it's all falling apart now.
It's all falling apart.
That's the exciting part. Even though it's a little unsettling, it may be, a little like, whoa, trying to wrap your head around it. But it's there. The lie is starting to break down and fall apart because it is time for it to. It's time for it to happen. It's time for it to happen. So that's the exciting part.
Family. It's no telling the things are going to be revealed. But whatever it is, I'm excited nonetheless.